Greetings, sziasztok! I am Szántai Gábor and you are listening to the Hungarian History Podcast, episode 14, Temesvár 1552, the last stand of Losonczy István. This was the year when the Ottoman war machine rolled across the southern plains, aiming to smash one of Hungary's last southern fortresses. Outnumbered, undersupplied, and betrayed by supposed allies, Captain Losonczy and his men faced an army they could never hope to match. What followed was one of the most dramatic sieges of the 16th century, a story of defiance, blood, and broken promise. In the summer of 1552, the fortress of Temesvár in Romanian Timișoara stood as one of the last bastions between the Ottoman armies and the heart of Hungary. Its walls were battered, its garrison unpaid, and its commanders divided by treachery and mistrust. Against an army many times his size, Captain Losonczy István would lead a desperate defense, a fight not only for a city, but for honor itself. This is a story of siege and betrayal, of courage against hopeless odds, and of a final stand that would echo through the centuries. The Turks were coming. Across the Danube at Kilia, the Sultan ordered a bridge for the Sanjak Beys of Bulgaria and the Tatars of Dobruja. The main Ottoman host would cross at Haram and Kruševac. Along the Danube, mountains of grain and fodder grew, with the voivode of Moldavia sending cargo boats loaded with wheat. Ottoman logistics, decades ahead of the Christian armies, were once again flawless. To respond, General Castaldo and King Ferdinand's appointed voivode of Transylvania, Báthori András, summoned the Transylvanian estates to Torda in May. But the gathered nobles ignored the decisions. Once before, Prior György could raise 30,000 men. Now barely a few thousand came to the rally point at Keresztesmezője. Many nobles flatly refused to fight unless the king himself appeared, impossible, as Ferdinand was tied down battling the Protestants in Germany. Meanwhile, Bey Sokolú Mehmed, commander of the Balkan troops, swept through Becskerek, Becse and Csanád. Lipa Castle surrendered without a fight because the Serbian defenders opened the gates. But at Temesvár, the Ottomans faltered. Sokolú would return for a second siege, one that would test Captain Losonczy István to the very limits of courage and endurance. Word soon reached Temesvár. Sokolú was coming back. The mounted hussars and Hajdú infantry, unpaid for months, were ready to walk away. After all, most of the garrison had already been pulled to Szeged by Aldana, leaving the fortress nearly empty. To head off a mutiny, Castaldo rushed reinforcements. Diego Mendoza with 100 Spanish infantry, a battalion of German mercenaries, and Dombai Mihály with his 100 hussars. Aldana, ordered to bring more men, simply refused. The situation was grim. Temesvár still lay in ruins from last year's siege, its walls unrepaired. German armored cavalry from Lipa and Gyula had abandoned their posts in April, riding north to the safety of Várad. In April, King Ferdinand had appointed Losonczy István chief captain of the southern lands of Hungary, but he inherited two fortresses, Temesvár and Lipa, on the edge of collapse, and we saw what happened to Lipa. Taking the advice of the Italian engineer Martin de Spazio, Losonczy focused on rebuilding the palisade. But when he reviewed the garrison rolls, the truth was staggering. Of 950 riders on paper, only 400 were real. Even these had gone unpaid. Aldana had stolen the money for both the soldiers and the castle repairs. Temesvár was to be defended on courage alone. Losonczy planned an active defense, stripped the land bare before the Turks arrived, denying them food and shelter. In June he gathered the nobles of the southern counties at Simand, pleading for funds to repair Temesvár and for peasants to help with the work. Most refused. No king in person, no help. Others claimed the harvest was too important to interrupt. Many rode home. A few stayed to fight. By the time the harvest ended, Losonczy had just 2 weeks to complete the earthworks. The little money he scraped together from the military tax was sent away to calm mutinies at other castles. Time was running out. On 11 June he wrote to Archduke Maximilian, heir to the Habsburg throne, begging for 1,500 men and equipment, warning that his unpaid hussars could desert at any moment. He didn't know the truth that the Habsburgs were focusing their forces far away, preparing to retake Veszprém, and had no intention of helping Temesvár. Second Vizier Ahmed was closing in. After taking the castle of Versec, he camped at Mezősomlyó, just 2 days from Temesvár. Castaldo, fearing that Transylvania itself would fall after Temesvár, wrote to the king in despair, certain he would never escape alive. On 15 June, Sokolú Mehmed crossed the Tisza river unopposed. His irregulars were many, but his true strength lay in the 11,000–12,000 elite Janissaries and Assabs. By 22 June, he had joined forces with Ahmed, commanding a host of about 70,000, anchored by the superb Sipahi cavalry. The Ottomans brought 100 medium guns and 16 massive wall breachers, supported by legions of laborers for trenches and supply lines. Chronicler Tino di Lanto Sebestyén claimed there were 160,000 men. General Castaldo estimated 90,000. But both agreed on one thing. The Ottomans had come with overwhelming force and endless provisions. 2 days before the siege began, Captain Losonczy István and his Spanish lieutenant, Alfonso Perez, prepared to face what would become the most famous trial of Temesvár, July 1552. Temesvár was still scarred from the last siege, walls unrepaired, supplies thin. Losonczy had just 17 cannons and a garrison of 3,500 men, Hungarians, Bohemians, Spaniards, Serbs, and Germans. Barely half of them were Hungarian. Pasha Ahmed advanced with 30,000 men and camped at Mezősomlyó. He sent 1,500 cavalry under Sokolú Mehmed and Pasha Qasim to probe the fortress. They found trouble instead. Alfonso Perez with 100 Spaniards and the Serbian voivode Mila with 400 hussars charged out, fought them hard, and sent them fleeing. Only that night did Losonczy ride into the fortress. General Castaldo had urged him to abandon Temesvár before the Ottomans arrived. Losonczy refused. Supplies, gold, gunpowder. Castaldo tried to send them at the last moment, but the orders were blocked. He doubted the captain could hold out even a month. Losonczy was determined to prove him wrong. On 25 June, Losonczy gathered his men for the ancient ritual of the siege oath. Standing before them, he swore, saying, "With unshakable faith, I will sacrifice my possessions, my treasures, and, even if it is required, my life for the sake of Christendom. You fight for a true cause, to defend the holy faith of Christ. We will never surrender this castle. Swear that none of us will leave here alive." And the garrison roared its agreement. The same day, Losonczy wrote to his wife, asking her to sell the family treasures and raise money and more troops. She obeyed at once, sending 6,000 gold forints to the scribe called Földvári, who hired 500 so-called Frihajdú infantry and was joined by 700 survivors from Tóth Mihály's band. Their fate would be tragic, cut down before they could ever reach Temesvár. No other help would come. Transylvanian forces were pinned far to the east. Voivod Báthori András, pleading illness, avoided all responsibility and left the matter to Castaldo, who, hoping the Ottomans might be satisfied with Transylvanian tax payments, pressed Aldana only weekly to send reinforcements from Lippa. As the siege tightened, Castaldo finally acted, sending 6 cannons, food and gunpowder from Várad to Aldana, with orders to deliver them to Temesvár at all costs. Aldana never even tried. He kept the supplies for himself, just as he withheld 200 German reinforcements sent under Zárai Pál. His grudge against Losonczy, likely born from the captain uncovering his theft, now served the Ottomans better than the Habsburg cause. Then came a challenge. 10 Szipehi cavalry and the Aga rode up to the walls, shouting for duels, to break lances. Losonczy listened with a smile, strapped on his helmet and called for volunteers. The Hungarians and many Spaniards stepped forward. The German and Bohemian officers declined. The choice came down to dice. Perez Alphonse rolled a 6. Trumpets sounded as the 2 champions rode out. The clash was brief and bloody. 2 Sipahis fell in the first charge, 2 more after, and 2 tumbled from their horses with shattered lances. The survivors fled. Losonczy and Perez returned without a scratch. On the very first day of the siege, the captain had staked his life in open combat. Enraged by the humiliation, Second Vizier Ahmed swore to smash the castle to rubble. On 27 June, the great bombardment began. Under cover of the night before, the Ottomans had dug deep trenches close to the walls, hauling their heavy guns forward. Soon the market square was burning. The eastern gate lay under constant fire, and the bastions shook under the pounding of the enemy's cannonballs. On 28 June, the rest of the Ottoman army and their heavy guns arrived. As they dismounted and unpacked, Losonczy struck, launching a sudden sally that killed or captured many and sent a ripple of confidence through the garrison. Ahmed, a veteran of many campaigns, placed Sokolú Mehmed's forces to the east and Pasha Hassan's to the west. But Temesvár couldn't be completely surrounded. The marshes and high waters left channels open, allowing Losonczy to slip letters out through the reeds. Aldana, meanwhile, told Castaldo that not even a fly could get in the castle. a lie that began to erode Castaldo's trust. He even remarked bitterly that the money Aldana spent on Lipa's defences could have rebuilt Vienna. Still, he ordered troops under George Helfenstein and Brandeis to march to Temesvár, but they refused, unpaid for 5 months. By Castaldo's own count, Losonczy now commanded 1,000 Hungarian horse riders, 200 Hajdú infantrymen, 300 Bohemians, 250 Spaniards, and 150 Germans. Some sources give 500 Spaniards. Ahmed, in turn, had 36 great siege guns, pounding the walls day and night, firing in 2 relentless volleys. The Ottoman batteries were positioned against the eastern and northern gates, the northern stone wall, and even at the city's churches and towers. Fear began to crack the defenders. Bohemian mercenaries guarding a section of the wall threatened to leave, and Losonczy had to put down their mutiny on 2 July. To shield his men, he withdrew them from the undefended outer town. Then, to deny the enemy cover, he set the district of Sziget ablaze and destroyed its bridge. The Ottomans quickly saw the burning outer town as the perfect gun platform. They doused the flames, hauled their heavy artillery in, and from there pounded the eastern gate and its earthworks until the walls cracked. Branches and timbers filled the moat, paving the way for an assault. On 3 July, Szendzsek Bey Mustafa Tembel of Edirne led the first general attack, drums and pipes blaring. Wave after wave surged at the breach. Each time the defenders threw one back, a fresh Ottoman line advanced. Losonczy himself fought at the gap, where Hungarians and Spaniards held firm. Even the Janissaries failed to break them. Retreating Janissaries ran into Mustafa's own riflemen, who were ordered to shoot any man who fled. Rallying his troops, Mustafa charged again. The Janissaries, trapped between 2 fires, surged forward and forced the Spaniards of Captain Castelluvio from their trenches, seizing the breach. Ottoman soldiers clambered up the walls and battered at the gate, until Castelluvio hurled himself in front of his retreating men, turned them round, and drove them back into the fight. Losonczy hurled the Hajdú soldiers into the fray to aid the Spaniards. Their fierce charge swept the Ottomans from the trenches. In the 4-hour struggle, 2,000 attackers fell. The defenders lost 150 people, not counting the wounded. As Bey Mustafa tried to rally his men once again in the outer town, a Spanish bullet struck him in the chest. The Janissaries carried him away, but returned in fury, clambering over the rubble. Losonczy fought in the front line, urging his exhausted soldiers on until the enemy broke off. He stayed at the breach through the night. That day, Captain Castelluvio met his end. After the battle, he had removed his armor to wash the dust and sweat away. A Janissary, spotting him, fired a shot straight through his heart. The Spaniard's spirit faltered, until the Hungarians avenged him in a brutal sally, cutting down Ottomans in the outer town until dusk. Losonczy buried Castelluvio at the bastion where he fell, then placed the Spanish under Captain Mendoza. Even after such losses, the Ottomans stormed the eastern gate and its bastion, briefly seizing them, before being driven out. That night, Losonczy's men walled up and repaired the gaps, under the cover of darkness. In the days that followed, the Ottomans struck at the northern city walls and the eastern side of the castle. In June, high waters had shielded the water tower, but in July the heat dried the marshes, and the enemy drained what remained, clearing the approach. By 6 July, the northern walls lay in ruins, with breaches yawning wide. Twice the Janissaries stormed through, twice the Hungarians and the Spaniards drove them back in brutal fighting. Many of Ahmed's best men lay dead in the gaps. Then Ahmed learned Losonczy's garrison was unpaid. Sensing an opening, he sent word. If the tax owed by King János Zsigmond reached the Sultan promptly, the siege would end. Losonczy, knowing it was a ploy, feigned interest, using the pause to shore up his shattered defences. The Ottomans saw through the ruse. Chronicler Jelazade Mustafa noted that, saying, "The infidels seemed willing to pay taxes only to gain time." Still, a brief ceasefire followed. Losonczy worked feverishly to rebuild the walls and sent desperate pleas for aid. To Voivod Báthori András he wrote shortly before his heroic death the following: "If your lordships were as silent as up to now, you would lose the country and us." He reminded Báthori of his responsibility as an appointed voivode of Transylvania, adding that he should not follow the example of the cowardly, indifferent attitude of the foreign mercenaries, especially saying, "That invious villain Aldana should not be trusted because he doesn't even know his present location." Well, also he made a remark about Báthori's health, knowing that the voivode excused himself because of his alleged illness. "Your lordship, please write to me about how your health is doing, because we are in good health, and we are merrily waiting for the hour when we will have to pay our last debt." And with grim clarity, "As for me, I am not going to see any shortage in my good faith in God, nor my faithfulness and love towards my homeland, until my spirit remains in my flesh, due to my trust in the living God. As for you, if you want to live in Hungarian dominions, trust not your matters to foreigners, as they treat Hungarians like dirt. I recount what I have seen with my very own eyes. It is obvious that nobody pities our nation or us." In the end, it would be the Western mercenaries who pressed Losonczy to surrender, but their contracts explain why. They were hired to hold the fortress only until relief arrived, and no relief was coming. By July 12, 1552, Temesvár's walls were shattered, and gunpowder was running low. Ahmed now struck at the water tower, determined to sever the town from the castle. His artillery pounded the earthen bastion at the northern gate until it crumbled, then sent troops to tear down what remained. Before dawn, 2,000 Ottoman warriors crossed the Bega River in silence, catching the Spanish guards off balance and sending them fleeing. They hacked the palisade apart and dug wide gaps into the defences. Losonczy rushed reinforcements to the breach, and a hasty second barricade went up under musket fire. At first light, On 13 July, the ceasefire ended in full fury. Janissary columns crashed into the northern walls, while other waves hurled themselves at the eastern gate. Losonczy, leading a sally with picked men, struck the Janissaries from the side, while every available cannon and musket raked their ranks. After brutal hand-to-hand fighting, the enemy fell back. Meanwhile, the Ottomans reached the castle's island and built a towering mound of earth and branches up to the bastions. Riflemen took position on its crest, dragging up small cannon. Ahmed fed fresh troops into the fight, and the fire from the above tore bloody gaps in the Spanish ranks. Captain Mendoza was finally forced to abandon the ramparts. The Ottomans hauled heavy cannon into position, silencing the defenders' guns and blasting the gate to splinters at point-blank range. Chronicle Jalaladze Mustafa wrote that the cannon duel was as if it were raining from the cannons. Even Ahmed's horse was shot beneath him. On 18 July, the second vizier tried once more to negotiate, this time with bribes of gold, silver, fine horses, and costly gifts. Losonczy's answer was blunt. He would rather die 10 times over than betray his cause. The next day, a messenger from Castaldo slipped into the fortress with 3,500 gold forints for the mercenaries, but it was a token comfort. Food was nearly gone. Ahmed had his own troubles. His powder was running low, and for a time the bombardment ceased while supplies came from Szendrő and Belgrade, Nándorfehérvár. By Losonczy's estimate, in his final letter, only a quarter of Ahmed's 50,000 men were truly fit to fight, and they would abandon the siege if they heard a Christian relief force was coming. On 20 July the guns roared again, smashing the water tower. The northwest bastion blocked the Ottoman approach, so Ahmed built an earthen mound equal in height to Christian works. The fighting was fierce, Ottoman losses mounting even by their own chronicler's admission. By 24 July, the targeted bastions were flattened, the moats choked with rubble, and the water tower reduced to a single standing wall. That afternoon, Ahmed launched a general assault on the eastern gate and the water tower. The Janissaries broke through at the latter, only to be hurled back by Losonczy's leading dismounted hussars, Bohemians, Germans, and Spaniards in a savage counterattack. Mendoza was badly wounded, but urged his comrades to keep fighting. Losonczy lost 150 men in the clash, but the Ottomans paid far more dearly, among them Ahmed's chief officer, Kubad. Witnesses called the fight of 24 July one of the most glorious deeds of the 16th century castle wars. At dawn on 25 July, the Ottomans struck again, giving the defenders no rest. Fire swept through the city, and Losonczy had to send men to fight the flames, leaving too few to hold the water tower. The enemy seized it, forcing Losonczy to pull all remaining troops into the shuttered inner castle. When the Turks pressed in, they were thrown back by the fierce stand of Pattantyús Balázs and his men. By nightfall, the defenders had neither food nor powder. Most of the Hungarians were dead, and there was no shelter left from the Ottoman guns. Ahmed sent an envoy offering safe conduct if the castle surrendered. Losonczy refused. He remembered Veszprém castle, where a garrison that surrendered under promise of mercy was slaughtered 2 months earlier. That night, Ottoman voices outside the walls called for surrender again. Losonczy's officers and the city's delegates urged him to accept. He still refused. But on the morning of 26 July, a Spanish officer made terms with Ahmed behind Losonczy's back, securing a sealed guarantee. Faced with the united front from the foreign officers, Losonczy had no choice but to yield. The agreement allowed the garrison to march out armed, banners high, with their belongings in wagons, and promised the burghers their city would be spared. On 27 July, the defenders marched out of Temesvár. First went the wagons of the burghers, then the injured under hussar escort. Next came the garrison, led by Vice-Comesz Battyai Farkas, flags flying. Behind them rode Losonczy with Forgás Simon and Alonso Perez among his hussars, armorless, to show he would never be taken alive. The surviving foreign mercenaries followed, then the few Haidu infantry, the townsfolk who chose exile, and finally the Spanish rearguard. But Ahmed had already decided to kill them all anyway. Janissaries lined both sides of the path. At the drawbridge, Sokolú Mehmed and Bey Kazim greeted Losonczy with great ceremony, swearing good faith. The moment the last Spaniard crossed, a cannon fired. Ottomans pounced on the valuables in plain sight. Armed Spaniards were cut down first. Janissaries dragged away young women and boys, killing those who tried to protect them. When Losonczy's page, Tomori Endre, was pulled from his horse, the captain cut the attacker down. Then he gave his final order to Forgás Simon, fight to the death. Drums and trumpets sounded, and the Christians struck back in a last hopeless charge. Losonczy's dagger killed the Sandzsák Bey before his horse fell. Surrounded, he fought on until a spear pierced the left side of his chest. Dragged on a rope before Ahmed, he was called a dog, but he spat his last curse. Be cursed, you vile oath-breaker! Let all the curse of the Hungarians' God fall on you! Seeing Losonczy's 2 lethal wounds, Ahmed ordered him beheaded. His body was buried with military honors, but his head was skinned, stuffed with scented grass, and sent to the Sultan in Istanbul. His skull was set on a stake before the gates of Temesvár, a grim trophy of a broken promise. The siege of Temesvár ended not in surrender, but in treachery. Promises of safe conduct dissolved in cannon smoke and blood. Yet Losonczy's last charge, his defiance in the face of certain death, became a symbol of Hungarian resolve, a reminder that even in defeat there can be victory of the spirit. In the chronicles of friend and foe alike, his name endured, and so too did the warning he left for the future that a nation which trusts its defense to others will find none who truly pity it. That was episode 14 of the Hungarian History Podcast, Temesvár 1552, The Last Stand of Losonczy István. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow the podcast and share it with others who might be interested in Hungarian history. Only your support helps keep this project alive. You can find additional ways to support my work on Patreon, Substack, and Buy Me a Coffee. Links are in the description. In our next episode, we will move further into the mid-16th century, exploring a few more famous sieges, or perhaps we will have a special guest. Thank you for listening, and join me again as we continue uncovering the dramatic story of Hungary's past. Goodbye, sziasztok, a viszonthallásra!